Hello, everyone. This is our Christian Brothers and Sisters Transition Program YouTube channel, and today we have Keith Strickland with us. How you doing today, Keith?
I'm doing great, Brandon.
Awesome. We're glad to have you today. So, want to ask you a few questions and share your testimony with us today.
Fire away.
All right. So, what was your life like before Christ?
Well, I got to tell you, it's a lot different than it is now. Before Christ, actually, when I was young, I had a pretty good childhood. My mom and dad really encouraged me. They took me to church, did a bunch of things, but through some of my hobbies, motocross riding and motorcycle riding and hunting and fishing, and especially sports at school, started hanging around with a bunch of different people and learning new things that I wouldn't necessarily learn in my neighborhood or, with my parents. I learned how to drink and how to smoke at age 12. and I was drinking pretty quickly by age 15. I was about drinking at least every 2 days. So it started then, and from there it just led to masquerading feelings and broken relationships, and from learning over the years through recovery that a lot of the hurts that I had tamed from my biological parents, was hiding a lot of that, and ended up becoming, it was embarrassing enough, one of the biggest cocaine dealers in Lower Alexandria and 3 high schools. Ended up getting in trouble. 2 days after my 18th birthday, when it counted, I started getting in trouble. Ended up, before Christ, long story short, 9 DUIs, 15, 16 times in jail, down at least that many times. Long periods of time, short periods of time, different precincts, different jurisdictions, different states. And ended up being a alcoholic, drug abuser, relationship abuser, and looking at a lot of time in jail.
So you mentioned recovery. So I know you've been working on yourself, right, through the Lord for many years. Is there one thing you could pinpoint that you learned from recovery that's helped you? Or is it just a combination of a lot of things?
The biggest thing that changed my life in recovery is what I share at work to this day, is I'm not alone anymore. Before Christ and before I was trying to get through this world alone. Now, I had friends and people that said they cared for me and stuff, but we are all alone. We come in alone, we go out alone. And the biggest thing when I received Christ is I'm never alone again.
Amen. Can you tell us, what was your salvation experience like?
Well, it's not your standard one, let me tell you that. So my parents were Christian parents. Drug meter of Assembly of God church in Fredericksburg, Virginia for years. And I would go when they could manage to rope me there. Or if I got in some serious trouble and I was, I'd go. But most of the time I was going to church because I got to go out and eat afterwards with my grandparents. So that's why I went to church young. But during all that time, my youngest brother liked this Christian singer called Carmen. His name was Carmen.
Okay.
And he was having a concert in Richmond Coliseum down here in Richmond, Virginia. And I was probably 17 or 18. My parents encouraged me and really wanted me to take my brother to this. For some reason, the gospel was shared, and I found I could not sit in my seat. I had to go down, and I knelt down in front of 1,000 people and gave my life to Christ. But I pretty much treated Jesus like my folks after that. I called on him or looked into it when I was in trouble or I needed him, not not the way that He's asked me to follow Him.
Every day, daily.
Right.
Yeah.
So after that, long story short, my experience was I surrendered myself and asked God to save me in 2011 in Indiana regional, or it's a small penitentiary they had there. And I looked through this window and this guy came, all I saw was this, I was looking at my little jail window, everybody's got in jail. And I saw this word chaplain on the back of this guy's jacket walk by, and I asked him for a Bible. And that day, I don't know the exact date, but it was a Friday, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and told him if He was real, I'd tell everybody about Him. And I've been telling everybody He's real ever since.
Amen.
Yeah.
So after your salvation experience, so were there a lot of things in your life that were easy to kind of shake off with God's help? And if so, what would you say were some of the easiest areas in your life to make a change, and what were some of the more challenging,
Right.
where you had to really kind of wrestle with God?
Right, I got you. So some of the easiest is, I always used to be ashamed of what people thought of me, especially my family. And I really thought my family hated me. Didn't want anything to do with me. I was the black sheep. I was the family secret, I was,
Yeah.
and to my surprise, when I started telling my family and acting differently, my family really, they forgave me for a lot of things, and there was a lot of things I had to ask for forgiveness for, because I was not welcome anywhere around family or children, or especially anywhere where valuables were at the time. And a lot of times when I was around, the authorities would show up just because of my drinking, drugging, and constantly warrants out on me. And the authorities would be going by all people in my family's house when I wasn't even in the state looking for me. So that was the easiest. The hardest was, I guess, learning how to do it daily, an integrity thing. Becoming a Christian is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable, a fish out of water. You don't want people to know that you don't know what you're doing. That's where CBTP really came into. But it was hard. They wanted me, my friends that I was hanging around wanted me not to cuss and be a man of integrity. And that's not who I was at all. I had to learn that. This guy Rombo was really good about teaching you things like that.
God bless Rombo.
Right, and I still struggle with some of that stuff today, but I have a wonderful place that pretty much sponsors everything. Sponsors Keith Strickland and all that he does.
So it sounds like your life after beginning a relationship with Jesus, it's been an adventure,
Right.
ups and downs.
Right. Well, so like I said, it's not puppy dogs and strawberries being a Christian. When I first started coming around, I got really excited and I saw all these people